Thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, so my name is Burhan Qaddoumi. I am a DevRel engineer with Voxel 51. My presentation is going to be a little different. That's why I called it, and now for something completely different with 51. Um, it's exploring some odd ideas that I've had over the past few months, um, uh, working at Voxel 51 and coming up with different ways to use 51 or plugins for 51. Um, so I assume that most people here attending probably already know 51, but just to get an idea, if people could drop a one in the chat if you've used 51 in the past or are currently using it, or if it's something you've never used or you just got started using it, leave a zero in the chat. Um, let's see what people have to say. Okay, couple people haven't used it yet. All right. Well, so then that's good because these first couple of slides will be exactly for anybody who's never used 51 before. So 51 is a computer vision dataset tool. It has a lot of different features. One of my favorite was one that was added recently that lets you do in-app annotations or annotation corrections. So you load in a data set, and if you need to start from scratch annotating, adding added annotations to that data set, you can do that right inside of 51. Or if there are already annotations, you can make some edits, modifications if needed. The main thing that I think lots of people have used 51, certainly where I started using 51, was for curating data sets. And the wide range of media that's supported by 51 really showcases how strong of a platform and how flexible of a platform it is. And you can use it from anything to for just looking through what the model predictions were or your ground truth predictions, or you could always look through for quality issues or annotation issues. One of the tools that allows that is the embeddings panel. So you can generate clusters from embeddings on either the entire image or a prediction or ground truth annotation. And then in the panel, you can lasso select groups of those embeddings to take a look at the either the image or the annotation prediction and look for outliers in your data set in that way. Super powerful, super useful. But of course, the big thing that most people are going to want to do is do some model evaluation. And so the model evaluation panel really does give you the opportunity to kind of pit a model against itself with a different data set training, or two totally different models trained on the same data set. And as just kind of a firsthand experience, I think it was really, really useful for me when I had a boss once ask me a question about the confusion matrix and said, "Oh, what do the samples look like for the off-axis counts for the model?" And you can just in 51 click on the cell for those off-axis points, and it will bring up all of the samples in the sample viewer grid on the left. So super useful, super helpful when somebody asks you a question that may have otherwise taken you some time to dig in and answer. So that's 51 kind of as a tool, as a utility, but I want to talk about it as more of a platform. And since there seems to be a lot of people who have never used 51 before, one thing that I think is really important to understand about 51 is, beyond the core functionality, it's highly flexible, highly extensible through the plugin system. And not just the plugin system, but also what you can do with it. And that's what I want to talk about today. So I put together four little sections here about things that I built or did with 51. The first of which being, the decades old meme now, can it run Doom? And the question is yes. Now, this was probably one of the first things I did when I started working at Foxel 51, was I wanted to make sure that Doom ran inside of 51. So you can edit your data sets and then you can launch Doom. And it uses something called WebAssembly, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a bit, but it runs completely offline. So there's no streaming. It's run locally on your machine. You just bring in the game file and load it up and it'll start running. Um, and it's really straightforward. On the Python end, it's just a single class with one property and a method, execute method. There's a little bit of setup for the panel in the application, but really this is the core of it, and it just runs in WebAssembly or WASM. So just a quick aside, because we're going to talk about another application that uses WebAssembly. If you're not aware, it's a way for you to run code native in a browser without using JavaScript explicitly. So you can take code that's written in C, C++, Rust, whatever, and run it inside of the browser, near native, fully sandbox. And there's no server, no install. It's just once it's set up, it runs. And that's how I was able to get Doom to play inside of 51. And it's just one of many ways to get a web app working as a 51 panel. WASM is one, but you could just use an iframe. You could build your own, really, using JavaScript and TypeScript if you would like. But there's lots of ways to do it, and I hope that one of the things people take away from my talk today is that you should try different ways and different ideas. So the next thing that I looked at was putting SQL into 51, which sounds kind of mundane, but then that may be because you did not know that on the back end, 51 uses MongoDB, which is NoSQL. So it's kind of the antithesis of SQL. So I thought it would be kind of funny to put a panel in that uses SQL, again, using WebAssembly. And it is kind of tongue-in-cheek and a little funny to do this, but I also did find it to be a little interesting and powerful. And so once you open the panel, you could type in a query, and the preview on the right there is showing that I'm looking at, I put in a query to show me the heat map or the frequency of the bounding box centers for the entire data set. And brighter colors mean there are more bounding box centers that are located in that region of most images. And then I did another one where it will kind of bin the bounding box, the number of bounding boxes or the size of the bounding boxes and the coverage of the entire image. And so depending on where you select on the scatter plot, it'll show you different coverage. And so, that's really just another way, kind of like inspired by the native embeddings panel, to just kind of do something different with 51, where you run a SQL query and then you can do selections in the output plots to visualize your sample or view your samples, review what the shape of your data set looks like. So a little bit more utility to this one than the Doom panel. After that, we're going completely away from computer vision for a minute. And the reason is because I used to do not software development, not computer vision, but I used to be a mechanical design engineer. And I did a lot of 3D printing, and I still do 3D printing as a hobby. And one of the problems that I ran into, or have run into, and I think it's common for others as well, that you end up with a smattering of files and that you download from sites with models that are published and shared by others. But the naming of those files or the folders for those files wasn't set by you, it was set by somebody else. And so you won't remember what that is or what that name is when you're looking for that model. And so since 51 has built-in 3D model support, I figured, you know what, I could just use 51 to organize my 3D print models. And so it was just a script that I wrote, put together, and it literally just went through the entire folder of all my models, parsed all of the data, all of the models, and then there were also files that had some metadata like tags, categories, artist name, so on and so forth from the site that I downloaded them from. So those go in as fields in FiftyOne, and now I could search by category. I can preview the image thumbnails. I can do a similarity search. I can even use the embeddings panel if I want to try and find interesting or different models once I start to get to thousands of models, which I only have a few hundred right now, but it was still an interesting and different idea. And I don't think that anybody else has tried this, but it was a lot of fun, and it's turned out to be very useful for me to figure out how to where my models are and what I have. Um, and Yeah, and it just worked. And then the last one, the last plugin panel that I want to talk about is called Patch Hunter. This came out of CVPR, which is the Computer Vision Pattern Recognition Conference from this year. Voxel 51 had a booth, and the funny story behind it was that somebody came to me and asked, "Hey, we saw you did the Doom panel, and we thought that's really fun. We think it would be cool to do a game for CVPR. Could you build a game that uses data sets inside of FiftyOne?" Yeah. When I heard that question, I really wasn't sure how to answer, but I said I'd try. And after thinking about it long and hard for a few hours, I came up with a game called Patch Hunter. What Patch Hunter does is it takes your existing data set and it looks at the image patches. So when you annotate for a ground truth bounding box, if you crop to the bounding box of that image, that's the patch. There's a label assigned to it, like horse or car or person. And so this game is just a time trial game where it will randomly pick a bunch of the detection patches, and it'll put them on 3 conveyors. And you have to try and click as many as you can. The longer you go without messing up, the higher your score. The longer you go without messing up, it'll extend your time. And as the time runs longer, the speed starts to pick up. It was a pretty big hit. A lot of people really enjoyed it. There were people who were coming back to try and beat their high score or try to beat their friend's high score at the CVPR booth. Um, and Something that was interesting that came out of this as well, that was a bit of a side effect. It wasn't planned originally, but I started to realize as I was building this that you could actually take the errors, the mistakes that people made while playing, or the misses that people had while playing this game, and you could start logging them. And then you could take that information and over a large number of players, so it would have to be crowdsourced, you could theoretically start to capture a signal about where there were annotation mistakes in like an established data set. Because if uh, a single patch with a person was presented to 100 people and nobody clicked on it, maybe that isn't actually a person, and it would signal that that's something to go look into. Um, and it was it was data review, but it was fun. At least I thought it was fun. Lots of other people thought it was fun. So uh, just another way to do something kind of different. Um, and those are just 4 examples of what you can do. And FiftyOne really becomes whatever you can imagine it to be. If you want to build it to be a game, use SQL, manage 3D print models, or be something fun for label reviews. If you could build it, you could probably make that happen in FiftyOne. And so I think that if you liked hearing any of this, my challenge to you is to try it out. Go install FiftyOne if you haven't yet. Um, Check out the documentation on plugins. If you use any agentic coding, there's a FiftyOne develop plugin skill that you can get from the FiftyOne skills repo. And try and build something different, do something different, or use FiftyOne in some way that maybe it wasn't originally intended to. And join our Discord community. I'm there very, very regularly, basically all the time. Happy to chat with anybody about any of the work that I did, any of the work that you may be doing or want to do. If you have ideas, there's even a project log channel where I kind of break down some of the projects a little bit more as I'm doing them, or like a blog style. So if you want to check out and see what the thought process and the development cycle looked like, yeah, hop into the Discord. that's everything that I had. Any questions?